Rink Wide Vancouver. Jeff and Irf with you here. The first show of July. We're through the draft. We're through the first couple of days of free agency. The development camp's going on. Schedule is out. Lots to get to, Irf. But before we do any of that, you survived Vegas?
Yeah, it was good. It was hot. It was interesting to say the least. One of the more unique events I've gotten to cover over the years is doing the draft in the Sphere. They definitely used every single one of their things to their advantages in the Sphere. But yeah, I mean, the NHL hit it out of the park. It's funny because now they said that they might not go back to they might not go back now, or they might keep moving forward with the in-person draft with just all the success. If you do that, it's going to have to be in Vegas every single time. I mean, look, you had Celine Dion come out for the Montreal Canadiens, Joe Thornton making the call, and Macklin Celebrini. There was a lot of cool stuff that happened. But yeah, no, definitely a cool event. Happy to be home, though. I'll tell you that much.
I thought it looked spectacular on television, and I did have my doubts, and we talked about that last week, that it's a lot of building, and I wasn't sure, but I'm with you. Like, I thought this league doesn't get a lot of things right, but I thought they did, and so I'm not surprised to hear that they're reconsidering. There's probably some other leagues that were sitting watching and probably feeling a little bit of envy that they didn't get in there first. Obviously, James Dolan and his ties to the Rangers, but got ties to the next two. Whatever the case, first one's in, and it did a great job. And incredible memories for any of the kids that were selected on either of the days there to have been part of a draft at the Sphere. You mentioned Celine Dion, Michael Buffer coming up to make the Flyers pick. That was great. Like, look, this league plays it so down the middle so often. To see them sort of branch out and try to embrace the Vegas theme and bring in some celebrities, I liked it. I didn't like the award show for a second. I could do without the award show. That was reinforced again with this year's version, but the draft itself, good on the NHL and good on the teams that made the picks. And of course, the Canucks sat there and waited and waited some more until 93rd overall, third round, but they did come out with 5 picks. We won't go too deep there. Most of the kids are out at UBC now with development camp, but when you're picking in the third round with your first pick of the draft, you're not going to hit a home run. They obviously went for upside and guys that had some gaudy point totals in their various leagues, and they're hoping that they can round out their games. But this is our first chance to chat since National Hockey League free agency on Canada Day, July the 1st. The window opened. The teams around the league went goofy, throwing all sorts of over $1 billion doled out in contracts on day one of National Hockey League free agency, and we'll get to what the Canucks did here in a sec. But do want to mention that Rink Wide is a presentation of the Vancouver Canadians. They're heading out of town after quite a homestand. They've been on fire in the second half of their schedule. They'll be back on July 19th for a 3-game set that includes a nooner at the Nat, a fireworks extravaganza, and a family fun Sunday catch fireworks giveaways. Those Friday nooner superstar appearances all summer long. Get your tickets 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. All right, 9 o'clock Pacific time on Monday, national holiday, but GMs around the National Hockey League hard at work, including Patrick Allvin. There was about that 15-minute gap when the window opened and players started to fly off the shelf, and the Canucks hadn't done anything, and I saw a ton of angst in social spaces, but that's the way Patrick Allvin operates. He's methodical, he's calculated, he likes to work in a cone of silence so that leaks aren't coming out. And we knew that they were prepared to take big swings at Gensel or Reinhart, but they came off the board before free agency began. And so the Canucks had to shift and pivot. And by all accounts, Surf, and I'm not sure what you heard, but it sounded like Jake DeBrusk was right up there at the top of the list of their targets. And they got their man. They had to pay for him, and they're going to pay for him for a lot of years, 5 by 5 or 5.5 by 7. So a max term deal for Jake DeBrusk, but 27. He'll turn 28 in season. 3 times a 25 goal scorer in the National Hockey League. What do you make of the addition of Jake DeBrusk?
Well, I think that's the only way you get him here is you got to give him the term. You got to give him basically what he wanted. And when you look at it, Reinhart obviously gone, and you knew that one was going to happen there with the Florida Panthers. And then the Jake Gensel thing, obviously, waiving his no movement clause to go to Tampa Bay and then obviously sign an extension there. Once that basically happened, the Canucks knew that there was no chance that Gensel was going to come here. I don't think he was ever going to come here anyways, to be completely honest, but that's out of the picture anyway. You get Jake DeBrusk. Look, I think you get a guy that can play up and down the lineup. He's a guy that's proven that he can score, especially in the playoffs as well. I think it was 11 points in 13 games this past postseason. He's a big body. He plays physical as well. You need him to be the fit with Elias Pettersson, right? And I think that is the selling point for him. It's not JT Miller. It's not anybody else in the lineup. It's Jake Gensel it's Jake DeBrusk and it's Elias Pettersson. And I think that the Canucks are hoping that works out, right? Is he a guy that's going to go be able to get pucks on the forecheck, to go, push bodies out, to make room for Elias Pettersson to go do his thing down the middle? It's a lot of years, like you just mentioned, but we saw what some other guys were getting. So for Jake Gensel, it's a great deal for him. And I think for the Vancouver Canucks, you hope you got your guy. He wasn't the guy you actually wanted, but you ended up getting the guy that you went for, I guess, on the secondary market.
Yeah, and one of the younger guys to hit free agency.
Yeah.
So we see it in today's NHL. Like, yes, it's a 7-year deal. Worry about years 6 and 7 when they get here. The Canucks are in a win now mode, so you should be able to get 5 very solid years. Like, there's reason to believe that there's still upside in Jake DeBrusk, especially if he plays with Paterson. If Paterson comes back and can be anything close to the player that he's been for most of his career to this point, power play opportunity, I think, will be there for DeBrusk.
Yeah.
He's a pretty well-rounded guy, in as much as he can kill penalties for you. He's got the speed, and that was something that they wanted to bolster the roster with guys that could skate, and Danton Heinen's another. It's interesting to me, and it is kind of funny the way it worked out with Zadorov and Lindholm going to Boston, and then it was basically like a trade on free agency day with Forbort as well. And I want to talk, because you've been all over both Lindholm and Zadorov. We'll get to them in a sec, but so much made in this market about Rick Tocchet and his systems and his structure. You're bringing in 3 guys from the Boston Bruin organization. Last 15 years, there hasn't been a better franchise in the National Hockey League. I mean, Chicago's got 3 cups, but they've also got their issues. But just in terms of, like, Bruce Cassidy was there as a coach, and Jim Montgomery, and the way the Bruins do things. Like, you're getting players, certainly, DeBrusk, that's the only organization that he's played for. I think there's value in that, in guys learning to play the Bruins way, and then you hope that that's transferable as they all come west here to Vancouver.
Yeah, look, I don't say this too much. I love the Heinen pickup. I think that's going to be one of the better pickups of free agency for the Vancouver Canucks. Look, we can say all we want about him being a hometown kid and from these parts and loving and wanting to play here, and it being a dream to play for the Vancouver Canucks, but the dream is now a reality. And the reality is, he can play up and down that lineup. Like, I mean, look, we might have him penciled in on that third or second line. He could be JT Miller's winger, one of the 2 wingers, right when the season starts next year. So that's a guy that I think is going to pay dividends for the Vancouver Canucks. Power play, maybe he'll get some time on that second unit. PK, he's definitely going to be on that as well. But Jake DeBrusk, I think, mentioned him as well. He plays the right way. He's a smart kid. He knows how to play. He knows where to be. And to your point, Jeff, like you just mentioned, it's the Boston Bruins. It's the mold. It's the structure. It's playing the certain way. And a guy like Forbort as well. He's obviously a massive defenseman. And the Canucks got some massive defensemen here in free agency. But I think the way that the structure has worked, and the way that they play team defense, and the way that things have gone for them this season. We saw Tyler Myers. I know it was, a contract year for him, but we saw him play some of his best hockey this season. It's the structure. So they're getting guys that maybe aren't quote unquote the puck moving defensemen and things like that. Maybe, Nikita Zadorov was a little bit, but it's the structure. It's the way they play. So maybe they'll be able to do the same things for guys like Vinny Desharnais and Derek Forbort, like they were with Tyler Myers. And we'll see them maybe reap the benefits of some of that structure.
It's funny, before we started recording, I jumped on the Vinny Desharnais Zoom that the Canucks did, first time that he's spoken publicly about signing with the Canucks. And that one was a little bit of a surprise, because the first signings, the Boston guys all came out early in kind of that first wave. And then there was a little bit of a lull, and I thought maybe the Canucks were done. And then Vinny Desharnais, on some levels, feels a little redundant when you've got Tyler Myers and you've got Carson Soucy. But Desharnais talked about how when the Canucks reached out, they spoke glowingly about the upside they see here, the fact that they think if he works with Adam Foote and the coaching staff, they use Tyler Myers as an example, and things that you just said there, they think there's a whole lot more here from Vincent Desharnais, and he seemed grateful for the opportunity. It gets a 2-year deal, so a little bit of stability there. Laughed when I asked him about being, when was the last time that he wasn't the tallest guy on his team, and he's not convinced that he's not taller than Tyler Myers, so may have to get them stand back to back in the locker room on the medical day, whatever, before training camp. But the fact of the matter is you've got a 6'8", 6'7". You've got Susi, who's 6'5", and forward, I think, clocks in at 6'4". I mean, that is a ton of size on the back end. And we saw the Canucks use size effectively against the Oilers, keep teams to the perimeter. I do wonder a little bit about puck moving after Hughes and Hronek. But again, this comes back to the systems that they play and working with the coaching staff. And, we'll see if they can level up a guy like Vincent Desharnais, who spoke glowingly about the year that he spent playing in the BC Hockey League out in Chilliwack. He's familiar with these parts. He said he told his old billets, he's kept in touch with them, and he tipped them off that he was going to sign with the Canucks, and they were over the moon. So he said he's going to have to make some trucks out to the Fraser Valley now that he's a member of the Vancouver Canucks. But, when we look at, we haven't even talked about Kiefer Sherwood, who, when I watched that Nashville series, and look, I'll admit that, I knew the name, knew a little bit about the player, but that was an eye-opener. Those 6 games against the Predators, man, that guy plays hard, finishes every check. Patrick Alvin with jokes at the podium on July 1st when he said he talked to Quinn, and Quinn was like, good, I'm glad we got him because the guy was a pain in the ass to play against. I believe it. Kiefer Sherwood, that fourth line, the motor was always running. And I mean, he should absolutely be able to be Sam Lafferty's replacement. And I think there's upside there. I mean, he's 29. So you always, at teams, whenever they sign guys, oh yeah, we think there's more there. A lot of times that isn't the case, but I like this signing. I mean, not a lot of money, but I think brings an element that makes the Canucks a little tougher to play against.
Well, and I think when you look at it, that fourth line, it was kind of always, a revolving circle of guys going in and out of the lineup there, and who's it going to be, and who are they going to put in there, and you look at that, but Pia Suter, Kiefer Sherwood, PDG, right? Those are guys that you have there. Just basically just me naming names off the top of my head. I mean, Podkolzin, is he a guy that's going to make the lineup and play every single day? That's not bad. With the way that their forward group is assembled right now, they are pretty deep when you look at it. And the ability to be able to go out and roll 4 lines, I think, is going to be huge for Rick Tocchet when it comes into this. I mean, look, we can talk all we want about Ilya Mikheyev, but there were games where the guy never played. And that was a reason. And obviously Rick Tocchet wasn't putting him out there. And you weren't. And then you go to that point, you can't roll 4 lines. So we're in a day where in the NHL where teams have that, right? You have the ability to do that. Any line should be able to go out and contribute on any single night. The Canucks don't have the players like the Edmonton Oilers do, where Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are eating 30-plus minutes a game. So for Rick Tocchet, Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford to go and, notice that and take care of something that, I think you and I have been talking about for a long time as well, as we've done these rink-wide shows, is when are they going to shore up the bottom 6 forward group? When is that bottom 6 forward group going to kind of come together? Well, now we've seen it here on July 1st. It is kind of coming together a little bit more.
Hey, I'm glad for Sam Lafferty. I'm surprised he was able to get 2 years, $2 million in Buffalo. We'll see how that contract ages. He just always left you wanting. I mean, the physicals, the toolbox was there, but he just didn't engage and use the skill set that he had. I think Kiefer Sherwood from day one of training camp, I think he's a guy that's going to be, hitting guys on his own team in camp and then the preseason and on to the regular season. I just think he should be able to give you everything that Sam Lafferty gave the Vancouver Canucks. And then, when you look at a player like Nils Amon, there's just too many nights where, he's in uniform, but really he's there as a penalty killer. It doesn't make life difficult on opponents. Even PDG finishes checks, but, I'm not sure that there's a nastiness to his game. I think that there is that element to Kiefer Sutherland. How many times are people going to say that? Kiefer Sherwood, as he joins the Vancouver Canucks. And then, of course, the size on the back end that they got. That's where I say that I think that, they can be a more difficult team to play against just in terms of wearing down opponents. And I know Patrick Alvin spoke about with the players that they brought in up front, DeBrusk and Heinen, Rick Tocchet ran out of options in the playoffs. He did. Mikheyev wasn't going, so what does he do? He got Sam Lafferty, essentially, and that didn't work out either. DeBrusk should be a more consistent scorer than Ilya Mikheyev in his 1 goal in the final 61 games. And then, as you said, Heinen can slot in. If it doesn't work, that you can put Pia Suter on that line with Miller and Boeser. It may not be a perfect fit there, but he's proven that on that line, he can hold his own and make that line better. And then, Heinen's got versatility to play both sides, both wings. So, I think roster flexibility is important in today's day and age. Now, is deep down the middle without Lindholm? No. And, obviously it was a blow to lose Zadorov. The fan love affair that was in effect, and people thought that it looked like it was going to get done. And then Patrick told us all on Friday that nope, Zadorov was going to hit the open market. I was really curious. That was one of the things on July 1st I was really curious about. What would the dollar amount be? Because it sounded like the Canucks had doubled back. They moved Mikheyev. We thought maybe that was going to be the impetus to get a deal done with Zadorov. Ultimately, it wasn't. He goes to Boston. And Irf, I was sure on July 1st that it was going to be at a number that made me think, okay, well, that's why the Canucks couldn't get a deal done with Nikita Zadorov. And so when I saw $5 million a year and 6 years, $30 million, good for Zadorov. But I have to imagine like total dollar value over the duration of the contract that the Canucks couldn't have been that far off. You and I have talked about them getting into the high fours at the very least. So it wasn't a deal that blew my mind, but ultimately, it was a deal that was attractive enough for Zadorov to make Boston his home for the next bunch of years.
Well, I think he got what he wanted, right? I think that that's exactly it. And he wasn't going to get what he wanted here in Vancouver. The Canucks were, not going to go past a certain amount, right? You're not going to pay a guy 4.7. You're not going to pay a guy up to $5 million to be your 5 or 6 guy. I just don't think you can justify that if you're Patrick Allvin and even Rick Tocchet, if you talk to them as well. It's a tough thing to do. I get the recency bias. I get how good he was in the playoffs and how much of a media darling he is and how fun he was to talk to. But there's also 82 games of a regular season. And there's also the age factor you have to go in. The contract, yes, I understand the cap's going up and things like that. But to pay one of those guys in your 5-6 defense core $5 million AAV a single year, he's going to play up the lineup in Boston, right? So the opportunity for him to go and play, in one of those top 4 spots, that's enticing for him. He got his money. And he's out there with Lindholm, right? And Lindholm's going to get an opportunity to go play with David Pasternak and make a boatload of money doing it too. So definitely good for those guys to be able to go and get their bags, as I always say. But yeah, I just don't think that it was in the cards for the Vancouver Canucks to get to that $5 million AAV, nor should it have been. I think a lot of people will agree that cover this team, that watch this team, religiously every single day, that yes, it was great in the playoffs and the story was awesome, but you just can't afford and you can't justify paying a guy that plays that far down the lineup that kind of money.
It always felt like Lindholm was destined for Boston, and the Bruins have now cornered the market on Lindholms in the National Hockey League. Did you get a sense, was he looking elsewhere? Were there other teams knocking on the door, or was that a marriage that was always made and just waiting for July 1st to be official?
I think he probably had some options, to be completely honest. I think after, the Canucks offer of 7x7, and they weren't going to move past that, I think his camp knew that, there was an opportunity to get some money. And the Bruins have always been interested in the Vancouver or in Elias Lindholm. It's no secret. I think that's been the last couple of seasons. I think it's been out there that they wanted him, and they viewed him as a target and a guy that can play up that lineup. And they needed a center, a surefire center that can play like he played here. He gets power play time, he plays on the PK, and he's going to be a big part of that team. But to answer your question, I think that if he wanted to have options, he probably would have. But to be completely fair to the Boston Bruins and to Elias Lindholm, I think it always was going to be that. I think it was just a matter of making the deal work and the contract structure. And then obviously we see it come out at 7.75 AAV on a 7-year deal. It's a lot of money, a little bit closer to home, on those trips from the East Coast to Sweden there. So that makes things a little bit easier for family coming to visit and things like that. But yeah, I mean, look, the opportunity's there as well, right? I mean, the fit here was a little bit different. You're playing in behind Elias Pettersson, in behind JT Miller. There you're the 1-2 center, 1 or 2 center. So I think when you look at it from that aspect of it, you got your money and you got the fit, and it's pretty much exactly what you wanted.
Well, the new Canucks that were Bruins, they'll go to Boston in late November. The schedule coming out, Zadorov and Lindholm will be back here in Vancouver a couple of weeks before Christmas. I think it's a Saturday night when the Bruins are in town. So among the dates to circle on the 2024-25 National Hockey League schedule. All right, when we look at the Canucks in totality, again, they get faster, and that's important. They get a guy that's been a proven scorer and maybe has some upside in Jake DeBrusk, and we talked about the others. And obviously there are cap considerations here, but did they need to go and find another scorer? Do you think they were knocking on doors of other scorers, or do you think they wanted to sort of spread their wish list amongst forwards and defensemen the way that they did, and even adding a depth goaltender on Monday?
I think that they were knocking on the door of Jeff Skinner, to be honest. Yeah. I think that, they were one of maybe 10 teams that definitely had some interest and made phone calls and made a push to try and acquire a guy like Jeff Skinner. But in the end, the opportunity for Skinner to go play with McDavid and or Draisaitl's there. I mean, who wouldn't take that? You make $3 million, you're still getting paid by, your old team in the Buffalo Sabres. And, it's a chance to go to the postseason. I think that when you look at it for that, the Edmonton Oilers are probably going to be there. Early on in the season last year, it didn't look like that, but eventually they make it to the Stanley Cup final. And, we saw how that worked out for Jack Eichel in Vegas as well. His first time in the postseason, he wins the Stanley Cup. So I'm not saying the Oilers are going to win the cup, but it's a pretty good chance of, Skinner to go and have a good season. But I think they were knocking on the door there. I think they definitely thought that they had a shot to land a guy like him. I still don't think that they're done, whether that's here in the next couple of weeks or whether that's, further down the summer here. If something happens via trade, I still think that there's a move that, the Canucks want to do, whether that's to add a little more scoring or whether that's to add another piece on that blue line to try and just shore things up, fully and completely there. And obviously maybe that depth goalie position is definitely going to come into consideration. They haven't gotten Shilov's done yet. So that's an interesting one there. And you saw Casey DeSmith go in to the Dallas Stars on a multi-year deal. So that's good for him. But there's still some work to be done. I think that when you look at it as well, there's a point in the season where you kind of decide what type of team you're going to be. So next season, when we look at it, it's the American Thanksgiving, right? Yeah. Late November, you kind of see where you are as a team. And in for a Vancouver Canucks perspective last year, they knew they were a good team. They were winning a lot of hockey games. In December, what do? They go and get Nikita Zadorov. And the end of January, what do? They go and get Elias Lindholm. So I'm not saying these big type of moves are going to come this summer, but I still definitely think that they're not done yet.
Well, when we look around the National Hockey League, lots of names on the move, lots of money spent. Yeah. Obviously, we won't get into all the deals, but, throughout the playoffs, we did 4 wins for 4 wins, and we would check the scoreboards and where series were. Obviously, games are being played, but I would think that when you look around the National Hockey League, Irf, on Monday, the Nashville Predators probably think that they scored 4 wins in free agency. Steven Stamkos, a Nashville Predator, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea, and even low-key, I like Scott Wedgwood as a backup goaltender there to UC Saros, and he's been one of the busiest goaltenders in the NHL for a bunch of years. Maybe they can lower his workload with a capable, competent backup. So the Nashville Predators, who were eliminated by the Vancouver Canucks, lose that final game on home ice 1-0. And obviously that didn't sit well with Predators GM Barry Trotz. So he goes out and he loads up with Stammer and Marchessault. That was a big day for the Nashville Predators, who generally over their existence have been unwilling or unable to spend the way that they did in free agency. So I'm declaring, they haven't played a game yet, but I'm saying free agency, there were some wins there for the Preds. This portion of Rink Wide, a presentation of Four Winds Brewing, family owned and operated out in Delta. Come check out the Four Winds Brewing tap room and kitchen. It's located in the Tilbury area, serving beers, burgers, and their famous tacos every day from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. We always tell you about the Four Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, easy drinking beer. You can ask for it at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. What do you make of Steven Stamkos as a Nashville Predator?
Well, it's just wild because then Julian Brisebois goes and gives Victor Hedman that kind of money, and they're the same age, basically. Yeah. Well, Hedman's obviously a little bit younger, but Stamkos was producing at 31, 32, 33, and 34 years old. He's a guy that it's just weird. I really don't know what happened. I know that, Stamkos put out on Twitter and his socials, I don't have the words yet, but he's pissed. Obviously, he wanted to be a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. The guy, when you think of the Tampa Bay Lightning for so long and so many years, it's Steven Stamkos, right? The guy's only 34. He's a young 34 years old because it seems like he's been in the National Hockey League forever. He really has. But yeah, it's interesting. Barry Trotz woke up and just shows violence. He basically was like, I'm going to go out and get scores. I'm going to go out and make our team a 3-line or 4-line team. I'm going to get a backup goalie. I like the way our defense is assembled as is. Let's boost that as well. And with the addition of Brady Shea. But yeah, look, they haven't played a game like you said, but it's the experience. They're now more than one-line hockey team. Jonathan Marchessault winning a Stanley Cup recently, Steven Stamkos winning 2 recently. So you go and look at it. That's going to be very weird to look at, to see, people are going to say Marchessault is weird. No, Steven Stamkos is going to be very weird looking at him in a Nashville Predators uniform. And I think the opportunity is definitely there. I think that Nashville has also become one of the places that, players want to go to. Sure. It's a great place to play. The fan base is it's a great fan base there in Nashville. You were there during the playoffs, and you saw how fun those games were. I've been to a couple there, and obviously with them holding the draft the other year, things that's definitely a hockey city. But opportunity for Steven Stamkos. I think that he's excited. I think that this is going to light definitely a fire under him. I think Marchessault obviously wanted to stay in Vegas as well, but that didn't end up working out. So, he's going to be a guy that's going to go there and be extra motivated. And it's going to be interesting to see, right? Because the Colorado Avalanche really didn't do anything. No. Dallas Stars, really didn't do too much either, but they've got all these young guys that you can hope that make the lineup next year. So, and the Winnipeg Jets, right? For how good they were last year. What did they really do? So you look at that division and you kind of handicap and you go, how does Nashville even lose it? But we'll see. That's why they play all these games. So it's going to be an interesting team to follow. Like, they're going to be the one where everyone looks at every single night and say, you added all this. Let's see what you got.
Yeah. And I think Nashville's become one of those places a lot like San Jose, where, there's a passionate fan base, but players can go do their job, be hockey players at the rink, and then just go live a life and, a good life. It's a fun city, as you said, but there's sort of that balance there where if you just want to go and disappear, you're not going to get noticed and recognized because you're a hockey player. There's a football team in Nashville. Obviously, there are other opportunities, but it feels like a place that's a pretty desirable location now, especially if they're going to throw money around the way that they did on July the 1st. Hey, we always ask for and mention listener questions and feedback. If you have any, by all means, all of our social channels they're on the screen in front of you. Hit us up. We're happy to take questions. And in fact, we've got a few that I want to throw your way. This one comes from David. It says, overall, what's the confidence level in Rutherford and Allvin to make savvy, smart decisions? I think you saw that they were calculated on July 1st, but they were willing, obviously, to spend money. What I thought, and this sort of leads me into something that we haven't talked about, and Patrick Allvin mentioned on Monday that he would prefer not to operate in LTIR this season. That people see the Tucker Poolman deal and think, oh, well, place him on LTIR, there's more money to spend. But we also know that the Canucks, they were handcuffed at the trade deadline because they were right up against it and didn't have any additional cap room. We know that they were trying to get out from under Boeser and from Garland to sort of grab some flexibility here. So right here, right now, they're not in LTIR. And one of the things Allvin mentioned was that if they don't operate in LTIR, it provides them a little more flexibility to perhaps call players up from Abbotsford that last year they were right up against it. They didn't have much wriggle room. Again, there isn't a ton of star power down on the farm, but I thought that's interesting when your farm team is just down the highway. If you have the opportunity and a little bit of cap room to bring guys up and add a body to the roster and those types of things. So it makes perfect sense. It's a question of, if they've got that cap space and they've got LTIR as an option and they feel that they do have to go out and make one more big splash, that's the decision I think that they're going to have to figure out here. I don't know that it's going to apply obviously to their summer approach, but once the season gets going, as you said, a couple months in, see where they are and then see what they do with that cap space.
Well, I think the biggest thing too with that is everyone else is taking advantage of the LTIR. Why can't the Vancouver Canucks, right? Vegas Golden Knights have done it. The Tampa Bay Lightning have done it, in years past, and then they're able to add late in the season and be able to make moves to try and put them over the top and things of that nature. But when it comes to cap space and things like that, someone once told me that no matter what it says on paper, that's always $1 million less, because you always have to have that $1 million extra for a guy that you just mentioned you're going to call up. So if the Canucks say they have $3 or $4 million, it's really $4 or $2 million in cap space, because you always want to keep that extra little bit of flexibility to be able to call someone up. So I think that, look, if it's a move that they're going to make to try and get money off the books, it's going to be tough. It's going to be via trades. And then you just look at maybe candidates that are out there on this current roster that they can go and move. And, the names are definitely the Podkolzins of the bunch. And you look at the Niels Höglanders of the bunch. And, obviously Brock Boeser is a name that's been out there for absolutely ever. But I don't think that he's going anywhere just yet, to be completely honest. So we'll look at it and we'll definitely see that the way that they're going to operate here. But yeah, I think that, going and having that flexibility and using it to your advantage is one of those things that makes the GM smart. And look, I don't think that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin have made moves that have made this fan base upset by any way. They haven't made moves that have hampered this organization or handcuffed them for years to come. I think that a lot of them have been pretty smart. I think a lot of them have been very calculated that's a word that, you used to describe Patrick Allvin, and it's definitely that, right? He's not doing things just for the sake of doing moves. It's not like the San Jose Sharks just signing everyone and hoping it sticks when you look at it. So yeah, I do have confidence in them. I don't think that they've shown me anything otherwise. And, when you look at it, I think the players do as well. So the fan base should look at it and say, okay, we can definitely trust these guys because they know what they're doing.
Yeah, and even the one bad contract I suppose they've handed out was Mikheyev, and they recognized that and were able to
get out of it,
spin off it, and I think that one fared reasonably well in terms of the price that they had to pay to get off that contract. That then freed them up to go out and get Dakota Joshua signed, and quickly after that Tyler Myers, and on into free agency. You mentioned Brock Boeser. A question coming from JB. And says, how would you approach the Boeser contract situation? Do you lock him up now? Do you sell high? Do you wait to see if he can repeat? It seems pretty clear that the hockey club's in no rush here. They're eligible now to enter into negotiations and could sign him to an extension. And you mentioned Victor Hedman. We've seen around the league that teams have been able to get to some of their players already after July 1st as they enter the final year of their contract. But I just get a feeling Patrick Allvin with the update that Brock Boeser sounds like he's rehabbing and coming along nicely after the blood clot, and that all sounds promising. But I just don't get any sense that this organization is in any hurry to enter into extension talks with Brock Boeser at this stage.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Boeser's agent, Ben Hankinson, is also probably pretty busy too, dealing with another client of his and Jake Gensel over the last couple of weeks and months. So I think it's been pretty quiet. I think that, they have the opportunity to have a discussion, and I think that they will, right? I think that now's the time where, the dust is settled on some things, and, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to Brock Boeser and his camp, and the Boeser camp, owes it to Brock to just go and have a conversation. Doesn't need to go anywhere, but just see what happens and see if there is any appetite to get this done. And look, maybe both sides are saying, let's wait this out and see what happens. Maybe both sides are like, okay, well, let's see how the summer rehab works. Let's see what we can get through here and see how the season goes. And look, I think that, to answer kind of David's question a little bit, from Canucks Pod Score, from JB's question a little bit, lock him up now or sell high. I think wait to see if you can repeat. I think repeating as a 40 goal scorer is tough. I think you can go and expect 25 to 30 now from a guy like Brock Boeser, depending where he plays in the lineup. And if he is in fact with a guy like JT Miller, gets all that power play time and things of that nature. But as far as an extension goes, look, I think that, the number you're looking at probably is in the $7 million range. If he goes and scores 25 to 30 goals, it's only going to go higher. Is he a guy that you give 7 times 7 to at some point here? Brock's talked about how much he loves it here in Vancouver, wanting to, create his roots here and be part of this organization. But, you look at it, it's going to be expensive, right? And it's going to be tough. And is Brock Boeser going to be one of the casualties of, just the way that things are in this nature of getting younger and getting better? Or do the Canucks really view him as one of the core pieces that they believe needs to be here in the next 3 to 5 years to maybe win a Stanley Cup?
Yeah, and it's just life in a salary cap world that you, at some point, you can't give big money long-term deals to every guy in your roster. Well, PD's contract, his extension kicks in. Quinn is going to need one in a couple of years. JT Miller, Philip Hronek, now Jake DeBrusk.
Thatcher Demko eventually.
Demko in 2 years' time. Yeah. So, there's some big decisions organizationally. I mean, there always are every summer, but so I think that's kind of where they have to take a little bit of a wait and see on Brock Boeser. I would say 30 has to be the baseline now that he's been a 40-goal scorer. The power play time that he's got, the way, just how much he plays for this hockey club. I'd like to think that, 30, but for a guy who's always questioned about his foot speed, is he a player that's going to age well into his 30s? And I think that's something that, it's fair to ask about. Maybe he will. But, those are the considerations that the Vancouver Canucks are going to have to take into account here. And that's why I say there just doesn't feel like there's any appetite on the hockey club's part to negotiate right here, right now, and engage with Boeser and his camp. All right, one more from Balloon Soup. Which rookies are going to get a realistic look at training camp this year? Jonathan Lekkerimäki is the name because, there just aren't many prize prospects. And when you go out to UBC, and I was out there on Tuesday, it's a scaled down camp. Part of that's because they just don't have a ton of prospects. But even of the 28 that are in camp, I think only 17 are their own draft picks. So, Lekkerimäki's right at the top of the list. Willander is the headliner out at UBC, and looked the part as I watched him go through his drills, but he's going back to Boston University. So, Lekkerimäki will get a look. I don't think he's going to be ready to make the jump to the National Hockey League. Probably needs a full year, North American ice, down to the minors. Maybe he earns a call at some point. Beyond that, when we talk about rookies, now we're looking at guys that have been pros for a couple of years. So, Atu Ratu's in the mix. Podkolzin, obviously, it just feels like this is a make it or break it year. Like if you and I are doing summer rink wides next year, and we're asking like, where does Vasily Podkolzin fit into the mix here, and when's he going to arrive on the scene and all that, then something has gone sideways yet again, and by then he'll be 24. So just turned 23, 5 years removed from his draft. You talked about the mix with Amon and Di Giuseppe, and boy, I hope he has a big summer and comes to camp and blows the doors off everybody. But let's be honest, the games that he played down the stretch and then he was spotted in the playoffs didn't leave much of a mark, and certainly didn't leave any kind of offensive mark. So it's on him at this point. Like, you can talk about him all day, every day, but at some point it's on the player to show up and become the player that he wants to be.
Yeah, you look at Archie Baines as well. Like, is he a guy that's going to get a chance here, a decent shot if there's injuries or anything like that? Patrick Allvin name checking Cole McWard, right, as a guy that they hope that can maybe make the jump. I know that they signed a couple defensemen here, but if McWard's a guy that can come into camp and be able to prove that he deserves a roster spot, which I'm assuming that he will, they'll definitely give him a shot. But those are the names and the ones that you mentioned as well. Just the pool of prospects isn't there yet for this hockey team just yet. You look at the Willanders and you look at the Lekkerimäkis. It's just not time for them yet. Lekkerimäki probably needs a full year in Abbotsford to develop as a pro and see the North American game and put some size on and play that physical brand of hockey as well and get hit and all sorts of things. And, Willander going back to university for another season, no problem with that. Obviously, he's a guy that's going to go and hone in on his skill as well. And there's time for these players. They're going to need these players in a couple of years when they need these entry-level contracts, when they need these guys to come in and make an impact, where they're not having to pay them a lot of money. So, if you're asking me who I really think, it's the players that we've already seen that have played NHL games that are definitely going to have a decent look this season.
Yeah, I mean, Max Sasson, I think he's continuing to knock on the door. I don't think he's going to be ready to make this team out of training camp, but at some point, it feels like the organization believes in him, and he'll get a look to play some games at some point along the way. All right, there's a couple of things I want to get to here, and one of them is the odds for the Pacific Division. Now that we have seen what these teams have done in free agency, and again, there's still a couple of summer months here where there can be some roster manipulation, and obviously no trophies are handed out until next spring, but the early look at the odds on the Pacific Division after a couple of days of free agency, what have you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at it, it should be no surprise that the Edmonton Oilers are definitely the favorite to win the Pacific Division, followed by the Vancouver Canucks. Good value there for the Vancouver Canucks at plus 240. The Vegas Golden Knights, 275. They lost a couple key parts of their organization, but, you still got some pretty good players on that hockey team. The LA Kings is an interesting one. The Seattle Kraken, we haven't even talked about them and what they were doing in free agency, just throwing money away at different players and trying to get better. The Flames kind of where they should be, and then the Ducks and the Stars. I don't think that anyone's going to be laying futures on for those two teams to go and definitely win there. But yeah, the odds are definitely interesting and brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Sekeres and Price Canucks Conversation. Yes, Jeff, you and I here at Rink Wide Vancouver. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, and use the code VANBONUS. But yeah, definitely a lot of interesting odds out there when it comes to looking at futures for next season. Conn Smythe Trophy's already out there. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup and things like that. But I thought with what has gone on in the division itself, the Canucks at plus 250 to win the division are pretty good odds.
All right, let's just wrap things up here. Since you and I last done this, you went to Vegas. Quinn Hughes wins the Norris. Thatcher Demko, runner-up for the Vezina. Not a surprise there. Good for Quinn. Liked his speech. Thought he thanked all the right people. He was named one of the 6 players for Team USA in the Four Nations Cup. But what would a show be without talking about Elias Pettersson? And I have to admit, I was a little surprised. Like,
I
it's not a
wasn't.
big deal. He's going to be on that team. I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about who might and who might not make the first six. He was third among Swedes in scoring last year. Last 2 seasons, he's been the most productive Swede in the National Hockey League. But we saw, I mean, his production tailed down the stretch and into the playoffs. And Mika Zibanejad is a veteran. He's been through the battles for the Swedes. He had a nice playoff run for the Rangers. Because Forsberg and Nylander were going to be on that team, and they were going to be among the first 6. And then they went with the 3 defensemen, Karlsson and Hedman and Forsling. And so Petey's on the sideline. Again, he'll be on the team. I don't have any doubt of that. But do you see it as a snub? You said you weren't surprised.
No, I don't see it as a snub. I think that, you look at just recent form, right? And when they were picking their team, that's exactly it. I mean, look, I think that, like you just mentioned, there's no doubt in my mind that Elias Pettersson is definitely going to be there in Montreal and Boston when the 4 nations collide, and he's going to be a member of Team Sweden. And who knows, he might light the tournament on fire and be a guy that hopefully that he does that and it catapults him to a great playoffs here for the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, Nylander always going to be on that team. I think that, the veteran presence of Karlsson and Hedman, you have to do that if you're Sweden and just have them there, because those are your 2 mainstays. Those are your 2 defensive stallions that you do have. Phil Forsberg, definitely a guy that, you can count on all the time. And Zibanejad, right? I mean, he's a guy that you look at and he always is there and has been there for Sweden when he's been called upon. And then I think when you look at it in his recent form in the playoffs, he's a guy that can go out and in big pressure situations just proves that, he's able to meet that pressure in certain things. And I think that when you look at it, probably making it too big of a deal this because he's going to be on the team, but I don't think it was a snub at all, to be completely honest. I think that, eventually he's going to be on the team. He's just not one of the first 6 players. Like Quinn Hughes, if Quinn Hughes wasn't named to one of the top 6, I think that would have been a snub.
Right. And when you do it this way and you release 6 at a time, there's somebody's going to fall on the wrong side of the line. And it just happened that Elias Pettersson didn't get included in the original 6 for the Swedes. But again, he'll be on that team, and the Canucks are hoping that he comes back as good or better than ever now that his massive money contract kicks in on July 1st was a pretty good day for him, right? Like he got the big old signing bonus to go along with the start of the contract. So if he was pouting or sulking, and I'm not saying that he was, but just had to look at the bank statement on July 1st, and things got a little bit brighter for EP40. All right, the hockey world sort of exhales. There'll still be some movement, but for the most part, what was it? I think 65 of the top 70 names on the free agent list are already off the board, so it's going to slow down. We'll slow down as well. As news surfaces, if required, we'll get the gang together and continue to push out Rink Wide shows here throughout the summer months, but with holidays and vacations and other things, it may not be as frequent as it has been to this point. But again, lots to chew on here. So we definitely wanted to get one in after free agency in the draft. And I'm glad that you brought some of that Vegas heat back here to Vancouver. Not quite at that level, but
no, I'm glad it's not that level.
Looks like summer's arrived here finally. So hopefully everybody gets out, and if we do have to put together an emergency pod, maybe it's on a golf course or on a patio somewhere, and see how things go. Mike and Jacob always working hard behind the scenes, helping us out here, and we appreciate them and have all season long. Irf, great stuff. And keep that phone handy, because if the Canucks do something, may have to hop on here and push out another Rink Wide. But who knows when we'll get around to doing the next one. But it's been fun here to track up and through free agency. Enjoy your summers, everybody. Before too long. They were skating out at UBC, so it's not hockey season entirely, but put hockey on the back burner for a little while. Just get out there and have some fun in the sun, and then when training camp rolls around, we'll be ready to get back after it and do it all again. So I think that's going to do it for us here. For Irfaan Gaffar, I'm Jeff Paterson. As always, thanks so much for listening to another edition of Rink Wide Vancouver.
Thanks for watching this video. For more great content from Canucks Army, check out Sakaris and Price, Rink Wide Vancouver, or our show, Canucks Conversation. We're your one-stop shop for interviews, breaking news, and a live Canucks postgame show hosted by Jeff Paterson.